I remember like going through the back and like crawling under, and I was just like, this isn't how I want to live, like.
Hello and welcome to the Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins podcast. We share people who've already healed themselves, along with health and wellness tips from myself.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins. Today, my guest is Ron Souers, who is a strengths coach, podcast host of Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD, and fierce mental health advocate, helping adults, especially men over 40, who are navigating ADHD, depression, addiction, and social isolation to reclaim their voice and reconnect with purpose. After decades of masking burnout and breaking cycles, Ron has turned his lived experience and professional training into a transformative coaching program rooted in mindfulness-based strengths practice, pro-social behavior, and something he calls fierce kindness. So welcome, Ron.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, and it's an honor to share this space with you.
Absolutely, and my pleasure, Ron. It's lovely for you to be here to share your gifts with the world.
Thank you.
So, for those who don't yet know, can you share about who you are and your work doing your ADHD guy?
Yeah. It's just been a pleasure, to be able to, grow, and watch myself grow and watch the guys that I coach grow, and also like getting on my podcast and developing that and having guests on there. It's been incredible, an incredible journey that I know. Sometimes I just wake up and like, like, not that it's all rainbows and butterflies, but it's like, wow, this is like the life that I'm building. And it's pretty incredible, especially I always think about where I came from, because that really helps to just put things in perspective for me.
Thank you. And you've spoken openly about decades of masking burnout and breaking cycles. What did that journey look like specifically?
So yeah, I mean, like, I'm an addict, and so that journey started about 6 years ago today, and I just was homeless for the second time. I was working. I was actually, I remember it clearly, being sleeping on the mall, the National Mall of DC, and just thinking that this is just not the life that I want to live. It's not fun anymore. It's just, I gave up. The fight of thinking, I knew I needed help. And, I started my journey in recovery, not necessarily immediately, but that gave me the reason and the platform to do it, because my mother was, and I love my mother to death, but she said, look, you can't come to my house, you can go to the homeless shelter. And that really just like, struck a chord with me. I needed that at that time. And if I didn't get that, who knows where I would be today. And along that journey, I was able to, do a lot of work on my foundation of, what it's like to live, and, as an addict, and start to live life, truly for the first time. And, there was a lot of mistakes, a lot of bump in my head, even in that early part. And I still do to a degree, but like, I was able to find out that I have ADHD in that process. because of the people that were in my life telling me like, hey, you need to slow down. And what really what really stood out during that time was like I um I was about to lose my job because I was destroying company property, injuring myself, and like I was scared, so out of fear, I went and started listening and went to my general practitioner and asked her, like, hey, I can't slow down. I need help. I think I'm going to get fired. Like, do you have any suggestions for this? And she didn't really know. So I kind of was like, maybe I got ADHD. And she was like, well, that could be the case. Here's a list of therapists and psychologists that you can call. So I went down the list and I was able to meet the therapist that I'm actually still seeing today. And one of my first impressions of him was like, he told me that, this can be a strength. And I was like, I don't know. I was skeptical, but, I still had hope. And, I like if I didn't come into that process with an open mind that I learned through recovery, none of it would have worked. So I was able to start to slowly put in, start using the tools, and some of them were like, I didn't know, if they were gonna work, or I expected something different, and some of them were like, write out your thoughts, um, because I had a real tough time sitting still, that would give me a lot of anxiety. So he was like, yeah, just write out your thoughts or draw in a journal. And, that really helped me because I was able to get some of these like thoughts out instead of having them, you know, just continue to spiral in my head. And that energy was kind of getting out a little bit. And over time, yeah, it was a mountain to climb, but I got a lot better with it. So yeah, and I'm still learning, still healing.
And thank you for that. And what would you say was the turning point when you realized something needed to change? Was that when your mum said that you couldn't stay with her, or when you realized that you were having trouble at work, or was there something else?
Yeah, I would say the turning point was, both those things, like just because I got kicked out of this house that I was staying in and locked out. And, one night because of some altercation, and I didn't think it was fair, but, that's the way it happened. And yeah, I remember one night that I was like, because they changed the lock on the door, and I was living in this house that was like had a bunch of different people, living in the same room. Um, so I had like this little bunk bed as my as my where I was living. And I remember like going through the back and like crawling under, and I was just like, this isn't how I want to live, like. So I decided that I was going to, the only other option was to sleep outside. And um because yeah, I could go to the homeless shelter, but I had a job at the time, and in order to be there you had to be back at a certain time, and it just didn't work with my work schedule. So I knew that I had to get into a program so that could help me, because I knew it would been, admitting that I was an addict and I had a problem was good, but I needed help to like actually stop using drugs. So, because that was difficult at that time.
I'm sure it is. Any addiction can be really challenging to give up. So you mentioned you joined a program. Can you elaborate on what that program was and how it helped you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the first program that I went into was this Salvation Army. I forget exactly what they call it, but they give you, like, you they give you room and board, meals, and you just kind of do this work study. So what you do is you sort out um, the donations that are getting through the truck, or they and then they separate it out into different categories, and then you separate it out even further to like what could sell and what necessarily won't sell. Um, and yeah, so I did that for a little while, and I actually ended up getting kicked out of that because I got into a fight with one of the guys, because this was in Baltimore. We were working out, and I like walked past them, and they had an issue with that, and I kind of laughed it off, and this guy like ended up hitting me in the back of the head, and I didn't retaliate, um, at all. I just kind of kept laughing, because it was surprising, and I think I did that out of fear, and um, so they have a no tolerance for fighting. So I ended up getting kicked out that night. Um, and, my mom came and got me, and she allowed me to stay at her house because it had been like 23 days. And, I ended up using one last time um, after that. And, that time was like, it was so like I had gained the trust of my mother, and I had made a change, such a change that like literally like that high was the worst high that I've ever had in my life. So I remember that to this day very vividly, like, um, because it just everything that I had built had just seemed to vanished as soon as I lit up. And um it just didn't have the same effect. So I know, like, even if I go back today, um still wouldn't be, like I, it wouldn't be worth it, and in any sense of it, all the work that I've done, all the spirit, it's just but it's not like those thoughts don't come into my head. It's that's who I am. That was a relationship that I had with with drugs, because that helped me so much throughout my life, or I thought it did. And I had developed that relationship because you're talking to a guy that didn't think that he could function a day without smoking weed. Like it's been an incredible, and now I don't even enjoy the smell of it when I do smell it.
Fabulous. That's amazing that you've come so far. And can I just backtrack a little? The program that you worked in the Salvation Army, what was it about that helped you? Was it that it gave you a purpose, that you felt helpful or useful?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that they had this religious undertone to it. And, at that time I was really, really into it. And, you know, um, there was a lot of connections that I made through that, avenue of it. And I really liked to, to help out with, I thought I was helping, a great cause, which I was. And, it really gave me this sense of like fear of like the real world, of like, that, like I do need to have a certain set of boundaries around me. Like there's certain people I can't hang out with. There's certain places I can't go to this day. I don't go out to bars. I don't go out to clubs. I generally don't go out to situations where there could be, like alcohol consumption. Um, if it's there, in small amounts, that's fine. But if it's like something going on where somebody could just easily hand me something, I'm still to this day like I tried to really manage those situations where, and filter out those, potentially dangerous situations for me, I don't judge people that do drink, like that do smoke weed or whatever. That's their own thing. Like, I know for me, that's going to be a problem.
And I love that. That's great that you've set your own boundaries and understand why you've set them for yourself and adhere
Yeah.
to them. So thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask, you did mention that you do some mindfulness, and how did that play a role in your healing?
Yeah, that mindfulness has been, something that's been like life changing for me. And the way that I found that out was like I actually I got an ADHD coach, and at the time I was starting to develop my business, and I was getting a lot of anxiety from like, I needed to focus every single hour on, a minute, even when I was working and doing laundry and cooking, were like, causing me a lot of anxiety because it was like getting in the way of me building my business. And, you know, um, like, so I talked to my ADHD coach about that, and she was like, "Yeah, have you tried mindfulness?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Yeah, maybe check it out. Here's some things you can do." And I was like, "Really? Just mindfulness? That's it? Like, what is that? Like, I just gotta be. What does that look like?" And so I started started doing some of the practices, and one I remember the first practice that I did, and it was just like I didn't know what I was doing necessarily, and it was talking about just like observing your thoughts and being outside yourself and sitting with it. um so like after I'd done that, it created this space, and one of my coworkers noticed me at work, and she's like, "Man, you look happy." And I was like, part of me is like, "What, I don't look happy normally?" Like, but I was like, I felt happy. I felt like this was something like this profound like change. Not that I'm always happy every time I do mindfulness, but it opened this door to give me like it's this safe space that I can go to, and any time in the day, and just be, create this space for me. Like, this is loving, this is caring, this is giving me time that I deserve, to not do anything, to be in the present moment, to just focus on, in my mind, really. It's like we have all most of us have an untamed mind, and like this helps to, and your mind does want to be tamed. Like it likes the cultivation, it likes the organization. And once I've been able to start to do that, it's like I've noticed that my mind really enjoys that process, because it's kind of like your brain's not really part of you in a way, because of the thoughts. It's there to problem solve, and it does it all day long, even when you're sleeping, but it does it in different ways from different parts of the brain. So it's like being able to understand that, like, okay, there's a part of your brain, your mind, that is you, but there's also a part of your mind that kind of isn't, and it's there to protect you. So it's like understand, and it's helped me to create boundaries in that sense too, of like where I need in my day to put mindfulness, because there's like an optimal amount for me. And I don't always hit that, like especially growing a business and things pop up, and but I try to remind myself and fit it in and schedule it with alarms and different things like that.
That's great that you do that. And I know a lot of people struggle with intrusive thoughts, and I have in the past. Is that something that's affected you too?
Yeah, it's a lot of thoughts, like the stories we tell ourselves, and especially people with ADHD, like our mind is going 100 miles an hour. We don't have time. We're like just pretty much drowning and trying to stay above water for most people that are unmanaged. I knew my life was like that. It was just like one thing to the next. And, I didn't want to sit there, and sitting there with myself and my thoughts. I'd rather do anything else than that. Was just a dreadful thing. So I understand why mindfulness is so like, people with ADHD are so adverse to it, but once I started slowing down and doing this practice, and one of the apps that I continue to use is called the Healthy Minds program, and it's like a free app. It goes through a journey, and you can choose different, instructors to guide your meditation. And one of the guided meditation was talking about, analyzing the stories that we tell ourselves, because those stories are important. Because if we don't know who we are when we wake up, that's a dangerous thing. So we need these stories to define who we are. But we have the ability to change those stories, but we can't do that until we slow down enough to actually question the stories and the validity of those stories. And a lot of the stories that I was telling myself was like, I'm not good enough, or, I'm not worthy of love, or like, you don't deserve this, because of this and that. And, once I've analyzed, like, are those things actually true? Because one time that really stood out was like, I was feeling depressed because, like, for some reason I was like, nobody ever, texts me or calls me to check up on me or ask me to hang out or any of that stuff. And I was just like, um, feeling really depressed, and I felt my worth was tied up in that, like, I'm worthless. I'm not worthy of like a simple text. And so, I got into this deep depression. So I was like, it came time for the mindfulness to come. And I was like, okay, yeah, this they talked about this on the last one. So this is my chance to, like, so I saw my thoughts as like is like a river just flowing through with thoughts. And I just look at the thoughts and see them as just, there's just something that's going through my mind. And so I saw the depression as a boulder, like this heavy boulder. And, I started questioning that, I was sitting with it and observing it. And, like, because fighting depression is just a futile battle, and you're never going to win. It's just going to get worse. So it's just like, okay, I'm depressed. It's okay. Let's explore why I'm depressed, and like analyzing like that, is that really true that I'm not worth? Because I'm sitting here actually doing mindfulness, loving myself. I'm worth it. I don't, my value isn't connected to other people and what they think of me and what they do. Maybe they're just doing the best that they can. So I was able to, that boulder got a little smaller, and that river was able to push it through, a lot quicker than it would have if I just sat in that state for a while.
Yes, and I think as well, it's about self-awareness, isn't it? Because we can go through life with these obtrusive thoughts and just think that they're normal, and sometimes buy into those thoughts and believe them. But when we become aware that actually the thoughts that we're producing, it might be our words in our head speaking. It might be our voice in our head speaking, but the words that are coming through in those thoughts are not ours. They were spoken to us when we were younger, and our subconscious mind is just replaying those to fit in with the mood, because we're in that depressed or low mood state. So when we become aware that actually these thoughts are just random things, and like you say, look for evidence. Is this really true? Or am I just believing this because that's what I've always believed? And is there anything that I could find, any evidence that I could find that invalidates this thought. Do people show me love and kindness? Am I worthy? Am I able to do my job? Am I able to live my life? And quite often we can find those contradictions to the thoughts if we look. But again, it comes back to that self-awareness to be able to understand what is really going on.
Yeah, definitely. You gotta, lovingly challenge those thoughts. It's not about confrontation. It's not about having an argument. It's about, look, we're together. Let's work together. Why do you think that? Okay, well, is that true? And just going down that line of questioning and coming up with ways like, okay, we've come up, and like you said, it's hard to not listen to that voice because it's our own voice, or it seems like it's us. It's in our head. It has to be true, because it's so hard to look at yourself and say, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe what I've been telling myself for years is the wrong thing. That's a hard pill to swallow. So it's about that acceptance and that awareness of like, okay, this is who I am. Let's work with it. Let's find out what you're good at, and focus on those things. And I feel like when you focus on those strengths, because we all have strengths, whether that's forgiveness, creativity, love of learning, spirituality, all those things everyone has. But our culture has kind of, ever since school, we've been conditioned to look at the negative, to look at what we lack and pursue that, when that's not the best way to grow. The best way to grow is to focus on what you're good at, where your strengths are, and cultivate those strengths to help you with those things that you may or may not be good at. And even if you're not good at that, that's okay, because we're all specialized in what we do. Not everybody's supposed to do everything. That's that's what makes it. I'm always saying that our strength comes from our diversity, and the way that we think should be as diverse as possible, because you can come up with the most amazing solutions. There's so many examples of how, I believe there was that cave in in the Chilean mountains or something like that, and they those guys were down there for 30 days, and they had to have teams of different scientists and engineers, and yeah, and it was like a guy that came up with a camera that was like a $10 camera that ended up helping them get to the point, and if the guy that was leading it wasn't open-minded enough to say, look, I can't listen to my engineers on everything, like maybe I got to listen to this guy who's got very little experience, but he's got a great idea, so I can't let my ego get in the way of these people's lives. So it's like, that's a great example of like how that was like, everybody was open, and you've got to create an environment to be able to talk about those things. Like, people feel comfortable that their idea is not going to get shot down just because they haven't worked for the company for X amount of years, or they're not friends with the boss. That shouldn't, that those systems are so weak and fragile, but when you invite that diversity and that different way of thinking, like, I believe that it would better the human race.
Yes, and it's about being kind as well, isn't it? And sharing your kindness around, because if we can be anything, we can all be kind.
Oh,
which
yeah.
which leads me on to you talking about in your bio, fierce kindness. What does that mean to you, and how has that changed your life?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Like kindness, especially fierce kindness. So like the first thing that I like to mention is kindness is not weakness. It is one of your strengths. It's actually a powerful strength, because when you're kind in the world, it ripples out like nothing else. Especially when you're kind to people that you may think are your enemies or adversaries. When you're like I've been kind to people that I didn't necessarily like the way that their behavior was, but I didn't attach their behavior. I've done work to separate the person from the behavior, because behaviors can always change. It's not that who that person really is. So it's like, and the other aspect of it is like ADHD, and neurodivergent people are, it's so hard for us to know what kindness looks like, because the world has just told us that we're not good enough. We start to internalize that, and we're not even kind to ourselves. But we do inherently know what kindness is. But it's like, be kind. When you tell somebody to be kind like that, it's like, well, how do I do that? Like, please give me an example. And it could be anything, like small, like smiling at a stranger, giving somebody a compliment, going out of your way, like picking up a piece of trash, doing anything that's like, that feels, that comes from a place that you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, because it's nice and you want to give back without expecting anything in return. That's the ideal. And fierce kindness to me is really standing on that, and like, standing up for your boundaries as well. So being kind to yourself, and like understanding, like, and communicating that in a loving, respectful way. Like, look, I didn't like the way that like, I felt bad when you talked to me that way. I know you probably didn't mean to, but like, we could have so much better of a relationship. I don't want to get that to get in the way of us having a good relationship. And if you could work on that, I'm not telling you like you can never do it again. I understand that that's going to take time, but like, it I'll work on like communicating that to you as well. And if there's anything that I did to you know for you to act that way, let me know, so that I know, like, so that we can work better together. There's no need for anybody to yell at one another or put somebody down. Like, it does not help anything. And it's absolutely not unnecessary, but I understand that it comes from a place of, that of trauma in their life, so that trauma needs healing, that trauma needs recognition and understanding. And kindness is something that we need so desperately in this world.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that loving kindness, it comes from a place of love, because when we drop into our heart, it's just so much easier to be kind. For some people can just be kind regardless, but for others, they need to just drop down into their heart and come from that place of love. And when they do, magic happens.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's that seeing people as as fellow human beings. They may not be showing up in the best way, but like, when I see myself in other people through that trauma, that shared experience of life trauma, no matter how that shows up, then I can start to say, hey, okay, that they're just dealing with something. I don't know what it is, but I know it's if they did, like, the way that they're reacting to certain way, it's I've acted that same way, so I'm just more empathetic. I'm not condoning what they do, but I'm not saying that I'm not going to talk to them or try to help them if they ask for that help.
because you've walked that path.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for our listeners who aren't familiar with your mindfulness-based strengths practice, how would you describe that?
So yeah, I'm going to do my best to like try to keep it simple. So you take mindfulness, which is like being in the present moment, or being curious about the thoughts and the feelings, and being more interconnected with your body and the sensations that are going on right now. Not really thinking about the future or the past. And then you mix those with character strengths. So we all have character strengths. So, like I said, forgiveness or kindness, love, honesty, all those things. There's in this particular practice, there's 24 character strengths, and you can actually take a free test. It's on the VA characterstrengths.org website, and it's an extensive test, but it's worth it because you get to understand what's your signature strengths, what you're good at, where they're at on and it really kind of helps to for you to understand who you are. Because like for me, my signature strengths are honesty, creativity, love of learning, critical thinking, which is known as judgment, and forgiveness, which I was kind of surprised that forgiveness was up there. But I try to cultivate that. And that really helps you to understand, oh wow, I do have a love of learning and I am creative. Like, and especially with ADHD, like we need to focus on what we're good at versus like what the world, because the world's been telling us what we're wrong with our whole lives. We know. We need to look at the positive aspects, because we can interject those things. Like when creativity and love of learning come together, for me, it's like my brain lights up. And so, but they're one without the other is not as strong as when they're together. So when I'm more mindful of like how creative I am, like I can become over creative, and like I want to come up with, like I have a million ideas that I want to do, but I have to use prudence in there, because otherwise I'm running around doing all these things, but burning out in the process. And I'm no longer am joyful about being creative. Like I no longer want to be any of those things. So I have to call in prudence, that strength, which is one of my lower strengths, and help with that, and that might take perseverance, which is along that list. So it's about bringing that mindfulness to the character strengths, and then using the character strengths with mindfulness. So like when I'm being trying to be forgiving, how is that showing up in my life? Am I slow to it, or am I too quick to forgive? Because sometimes you gotta like, it's not like you gotta hold a resentment, but you gotta think about, if you want to continue to tolerate that behavior that they're doing, before having that communication with them. So it's about drawing all that in daily life, in your relationships, so you strengthen the relationship with yourself and those around you. Because when you bring those character strengths and you start to see them in other people, it changes everything about like what's going on in your life. Like the whole dynamic is changed.
And that brings it back to self-awareness, doesn't it? It sounds like a
Yeah.
tool to help people to understand themselves.
Yeah,
And I also want
definitely.
I also want to touch on the fact that you mentioned about being creative with ADHD, because my understanding of ADHD is, yes, we can be quite scattered and all over the place, and with the H, with the hyperactive. but also we can be so hyper focused and in the flow and lost in what we're doing that we can sit still for long periods of time doing whatever it is that our attention is focused upon.
Yeah, and that is one of our strengths, our ability to just dive in and go hard. But it's like, if you're missing out on appointments or it's consistently getting in the way of you doing the things that are necessary for you to have a balanced, well-being, full life, then it becomes an issue. And there's different ways to get better with that, and it's setting timers, um, or like different alarms, or like understanding like the importance of other things that you need to get done. Yeah, I don't like to do these things, but maybe if I just do one, like do the dishes for like 5 minutes, then at least I don't have as many dishes. So it's like breaking things down into pieces, that you don't want to do, and then giving yourself time to do the things that you do want to do. Like that hyper focus is, I see it, because I can sit down for a couple hours once I get into something, and where's the 3 or 4 hours, and where's the time gone? And it's great, but it's also like, am I showing up for life, in those moments too? So it's coming up with, trying to find a balance, and trying to find the fun in doing those other tasks that aren't necessarily like, they're necessary, but they're not fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. So you've talked about your addictions and ADHD, and in your healing journey, you've worked through journaling, mindfulness, self-awareness, and time slicing, as in setting timers for certain tasks. Is there anything else that you've done that we might have not spoken to?
Yeah, I would just say like the emotional exploration, is something that's been, really key for me in my healing, because it's like I feel emotions every single day. And a lot of time, like what really started affecting me was like I got really good results with my depression with this MBSP practice, and then I felt depressed, and I was like, what, this shouldn't be happening. Like, but it does. Like, those feelings are good. We're supposed to feel feelings because they tell us, they're our GPS for how we navigate life, and like how we stand up for ourselves, for how we avoid things that we're not supposed to do, and many other different things, how we show up in relationships, all predicated on like how in touch we are with reading those emotions that we come up with. Maybe they're coming up with something from years ago that, it's like, I'm here, you didn't deal with me, now I'm here, like, kind of figure it out. So when you start to, sit with those emotions, especially like fear, sadness, depression, and all the other ones that show up, like, and sitting with them, and like you needed when you were younger. It's like sitting with your own child, and not trying to solve the problem, not trying to fix it, but just trying to work it through, like process those emotions. We're supposed to feel these emotions. We're not supposed to repress them, because that's how we come. I believe a lot of the trauma in the world is from repressed emotions that we didn't know how to express. So it's developing that emotional intelligence through that exploration, which has been so paramount in, like, adding to all these elements of being pro-social with the MBSP. And yeah, it's just a robust like practice that I continue to use in my daily life.
Yes, and I so love that you brought in the emotions, because we truly have to sit with those emotions and feel them to be able to process them and understand them, because I do believe they come up as part of our healing so that we can see them. But as you said, it's about observing them rather than being in the thick of it.
Yeah, maybe sitting in with it, but getting to the point where you're prepared to do that, because that takes work. You can't just dive in like and feel depressed or feel sad. Like, kind of gotta ease your way into it through dealing with like anger, and then sadness, and then fear, and then you can work on getting to the shame, and different things like that. And because that deep shame takes like, from what I've learned, and I've learned a lot of this from Rachel Kaplan in her book Feel, Heal, and Let That Shit Go. And which is a great book. And she kind of talks about, like, if you're going mountain climbing, you want to put on your gear so you feel safe. So it's like, when you're the same thing with your emotions, you want to feel like you maybe get into your bed and like create like a little cocoon of blankets and pillows, so you feel you're safe, so you can go into that and come out whenever you're ready. So it's about seeing that those emotions aren't that bad. And the other thing is, we don't really talk about emotions enough. And they show up, they're like, especially at work, they're like, show up and leave your baggage at the door. That's not a thing for a lot of people. Like, we try to mask but it's underneath it doesn't go anywhere. It's part of who we are, and it's one of the best parts. So it's about being able to express that and open up the doorways for more communications about how you're feeling, because that can affect your work quality. Especially being able to, if you're able to talk about depression with your boss, and like they're like, oh yeah, me too, you'll get through this, and like, it's okay. And just having that acceptance from somebody else can help you get through, like, because you don't have to deal with it on your own. So.
Absolutely. A problem shared is a problem halved.
Yeah, and I've learned that in recovery. But it's hard to translate the two into like a work life, especially I had to learn that, and especially through being pro-social and talking about the deeper issues, about what's going on, because that's really what we want to talk about. That's really what we're scared to talk about. And when you open the door to that creates so much more dynamic, robust relationships. Not with everybody, but with the ones that are willing to go deep with you.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Ron. And if you could share one tip now to our listeners, somebody who's going through dark times, addiction, depression, or even struggling with ADHD, what would that tip be?
Yeah, I would say just it's okay. It's okay to do that, and it's okay to ask for help. Like, I would say the biggest source of my strength is asking for help. And I get help every day. I'm only as good as the people that you don't see behind me, that continue to inform me, that continue to look out for me, and I'm continue to be open to that help, and help. Asking for help is not a weakness. It's an incredible source of strength, as I said. And if you can get past that, and understand that you're not alone, that the thoughts and the things that you're doing with are just coming from trauma that you have yet to explore, And that exploration can be scary, but it's one of the most beneficial, worthwhile practices that you can do.
That's beautiful as well, because it takes courage, and we don't always have that courage. But the beauty of that is once we dig inside of ourselves to find that bit of courage, our life gets easier. And the more times we do it, the more courage and confidence we build, and the more able we are to keep moving ourselves forward.
Yeah, and the one thing that most people don't see is like addicts or neurodivergents, like we've had to persevere. We've had to be resilient in order to live in this world. It may seem like you're just drowning, but it's like you've kept showing up. That's amazing. Despite all these obstacles, most people would have just crawled in their bed and died. Like, normal people or whatever you want to call it, so like look at the strengths that you already have, like just showing up in life.
That's just so beautiful. Thank you. And where can people find you, Ron?
So I definitely thank you for asking that. And first off, I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor to be here and share this space with you. If you'd like to keep this conversation going, you can find me on my podcast. Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD, where I dive into stories and strategies for navigating life with ADHD around the workplace. I've also put together a free self-discovery journal that you can grab at youradhdguy.com. It's a simple way to reflect, reset, and get to know yourself better. And for anyone ready to take things deeper, I have a 5-session coaching program called the Connection Blueprint. It's designed to help men over 40 move out of isolation, build confidence, and create real connection in their lives. Just head on over to youradhdguy.com for all that.
Wonderful. Thank you for all you do to help others from your own suffering.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me, and and you too, like see all the healing books that you have, and, for you to be open-minded and share like that social intelligence with that zest, like it really helps the world. So thank you for doing what you're doing as well.
My pleasure, Ron. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with anyone who you think will benefit. And can you leave me a review wherever you've listened to it to help me reach more people? Thank you.